Anyway, we are looking at the book of Revelation. We are in this study ready for Revelation chapter 6. Revelation chapter 6. And we're not being dogmatic on any of this. I'm an expert on nothing, and certainly not when it comes to this book of the Bible or any book for that matter. But we will not agree on everything as we understand, but we will see what we can learn as those who received this letter initially learned from the visions of John. Just to recap briefly, chapter 1 was a vision of God's Son glorified. Jesus is not in the tomb. He's very much in existence in heaven, and he is indeed our Messiah and Savior, and so for that we are thankful. Revelation chapters 2 and 3, we studied the 7 letters to the 7 churches, and again, for me, a key to understanding the book is to interpret this book as they saw it. This was written to them initially. So the interpretation has to be, what did it mean to them, before I can make application to us today. Sometimes we want to make application to us without first of all giving the proper interpretation. And when we do that, we get things backwards. So we have to see what it meant to them, then we can adequately apply it to us. Chapter 4, God on the throne. Chapter 5, a book that was sealed. And that's really what the rest of Revelation is about, opening the book, a lamb that was slain, and then a song that was sung. Again, here was a book sealed, and the problem was they could not find anybody in heaven or on earth to open it. Nobody was worthy to do that, but of course we know the Lamb was, and the Lamb is Jesus. The Lamb is indeed the Lord. So he will, one by one, break the seals and open the book, and he will disclose the contents of the book to John, but John's not going to read it. He's going to see it in a series of visions. Which do we remember more, what we hear or what we see? What we see. It's a great, great percentage more what we see than what we hear, which is why we try to use visual aids and PowerPoint and things of that nature to not only drive the lesson home, but to help us to remember. And so John is going to see these visions as God reveals them to him. He will remove the seals one by one until at long last the entire vision is disclosed. So now chapter 6, since they found one worthy to open the book, the Lamb's about to do that. He's about to open 6 of the 7 seals in chapter 6, and we will look at that. We're not, again, going to be dogmatic on the symbols, the meaning of the symbols. There are various interpretations. I'll give my take on it. If you have a different take, that's fine as well. But remember, whatever this means, these people in the first century had to understand it. They had to understand it, else why bother them with it? They had enough on their plate as it was, just trying to survive. So this is a book to give them hope and strength to endure the troubles they were going through. Now, that applies to me today, because we go through struggles and temptations also to leave the Lord. So it was written to them initially, but the application is to us whenever we live, to remain faithful no matter what. There is victory in who? Victory in Jesus. That's what Revelation is all about. Now, this chapter we're going to read of 4 what? What do we read of 4 of in this chapter? Starts with an H. Horses. 4 horses in this chapter. And let's look now, Revelation chapter 6, verse 1. The I is who? John. I saw when the Lamb is who? Jesus. I saw when the Lamb, Jesus, opened one of the seals. And I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder. A sound like thunder. Again, we've talked about that in heaven, everything's loud. I mean, you've got all these angelic beings. Everything is loud and voices like trumpets. Here is a voice as of the noise of thunder. Again, the idea of loud, getting your attention, if you will. One of the four living creatures or beasts said, John, I've got something for you to see. Come and see. What did John do? He saw, didn't he? That's verse 2. And I saw, John says, and the first thing I saw was a white horse. And he that sat on the horse had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. John is going to see a vision of four horses, and you can turn to the book of Zechariah sometime, Zechariah chapter 6, and that Old Testament prophet had a similar vision about horses. Now, obviously, you've got a horse and a rider on the horse. And each rider is going to have a different implement in his hand. Each horse has a different color: white, red, black, and pale. We are told specifically what the pale rider indicates. We'll get to that in a moment. We're not told, just in spelled out terms, what each of these other symbols signify, but I'm going to set forth they signify war and bloodshed, famine, and death. And I think the text bears this out. These are things that are going to occur on the earth in that time. In that time. This is written to them. Don't be looking for a white horse or a red horse or a black horse or a pale horse. This, first of all, was written to them, and they had to understand the meanings of this. These are things they would experience, they would see, these first century Christians would see and know. And all this indicates you're going through hard times, but guess what? They're going to get even worse. Some awful times are coming for these Christians. Now, yes, awful times come to us. We understand that. But first of all, understand this as they saw it. So the first horse is white. And in Bible times, in ancient times, the color white not only indicated purity, but it also symbolized victory. White symbolized victory. When we get to chapter 19, we're also going to see someone on a white horse, but I don't believe that's the same as in chapter 6. I believe the white horse stands for war that is coming, military conquest. A lot of times generals would ride, and of course we're talking way before tanks and planes and so forth. We're talking about using horses to fight. And many times the generals of the army would ride on a white horse, which would make him what? Stand out. Correct? You're not going to have a whole lot of folks on white horses. So if you see somebody coming in on a white horse, you might think, well, he's setting himself up. Everybody's going to attack the fellow on the white horse. But again, this was sort of a status symbol. And it really, you wanted to sort of stay away from the general of the opposing side because he indicated power. And so here's a horse that symbolizes victory and power. So the rider on the white horse has a bow. Not as in rainbow, but bow as in what? Bow and arrow. This is a military. Again, this is military. Now, you can read in Jeremiah and Psalms the word bow. Jeremiah spoke of Babylon's bows being broken, predicting the fall of Babylon. Jeremiah 51:56. And we see today, in Ukraine, you see those Russian tanks burned and destroyed. And that gives those Ukrainians hope. If you can destroy the weapons of the enemy, that again says a lot. So the bow is going to be the weapon of the enemy. And of course, Rome had enemies. Rome was number one world power, and whenever you are number one in anything, you've got a target on your back. Everybody wants to bring number one down, correct? Whether we're talking about war, whether we're talking about sports. Tennessee's been number one in baseball now for a long time. They may not be after going to the bluegrass state. And I think it's probably a good thing that they can learn a dose of humility. And I want to say, if you'll just play ball and shut your mouths. You don't have to do all that talking, that trash talking, just play ball. But everybody wants to bring down number one. Everybody wants to bring down number one. And there were people in the Roman Empire who wanted to bring the Roman Empire down. Rome had a fearful opponent in certain others. So here's a white horse, a rider with a bow, military. A crown was given to him. In other words, here's something that indicates once again power. Notice the crown was given. He didn't earn it. God is working behind the scenes to accomplish His will. He sets up kingdoms. He sets up one and brings down another. That's been true in the course of human history. And this rider went forth conquering and to conquer. This is a war horse. This is a symbol of war, to defeat. Verse 3, he opened the second seal, and a second living creature said, "Come and see, John. I've got something else for you to see." And there went out another horse, and this horse was what? Red. Some translations say fiery red. First horse is white, symbolizes war in my mind. This horse is red. Power was given to him who sat on it to take peace from the earth. If you take peace away, what do you have? Well, just look at the Middle East, or just look at Ukraine. What do you have when you take peace away? You've got war, don't you? You got fighting. You got killing. To take peace from the earth. Jesus came to bring peace. Here's one taking peace from the earth. That they should kill each other. And there was given to him a great sword. The color red to me would indicate what you use when you use a sword. What do you get? Blood. Blood is the color red. Okay? Whenever you have war, that's the white horse, then it logically follows you're going to have red. You're going to have people killing one another. You know, in the Battle of Shiloh, if you go to Shiloh, they have a pond up there. What do they call that pond? The Bloody Pond. Some say that's a bit of exaggeration. I don't know. I'll leave that to historians. But the thought is, you know, when those soldiers were fighting each other, that a lot of them crawled to the pond. Whenever you're very seriously wounded or maybe even dying, you want to drink. And so, as some say, you know, he had a lot of blood in that pond. And that I'll leave that for historians to debate. As I think Shiloh says that, so we'll take it as that. But the red is symbolic of blood, is the idea. So we've got war coming. We've got blood being shed. Verse 5, he opened the third of the seven seals. And a third living creature or beast said, "Come and see. I've got something else for you to see, John." I don't know how long these visions took place, whether they were snap, 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 one after the other, or maybe an hour interval. I just don't know those things. But these are the things that John saw. And now the horse is what? This is a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances. If you have a different rendering instead of balances, what might you have? Scales. He that sat on the black horse had a pair of scales in his hand. What do we use scales for? To weigh things. If you go to the deli, I want a pound of shaved turkey or whatever you meat. Well, they'll take that chunk of meat and they'll run it through that razor sharp slicer and they'll put it on the scales, won't they? And they'll give you so much per pound. Well, that's what scales are for, to weigh. And so the black horse is going to indicate famine or scarcity. We see that from verse 6. I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, again, with the scales we're measuring, a measure of wheat for a penny or denarius, and 3 measures of barley for denarius, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Whenever you have war and bloodshed, along with that often is famine and doing without and shortages. Scarcity is the idea. Some would say it might be better to die in wartime than to survive, because surviving is awful in itself, depending upon the situation. If there were to be a nuclear holocaust, God forbid that it ever would, but if there were to be, it might just be better to go ahead and die than try to survive in the aftermath of all that. It would be awful, but hopefully that's something not to worry about. When there is a shortage of food, what about the price of food? Up, 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 right? If you've got a baby and you're trying to find baby formula, well, you feel for you, right? Up, up, up when there's a shortage of food. You have similar language in the Old Testament. When Jerusalem would be besieged by the enemies, they would eat bread by weight. In other words, they would have to weigh out, they would have to ration food for the day. There was so little of it. You may recall in the Old Testament when, I believe it was Israel was besieged, surrounded by the enemy. The enemy had the luxury of just sitting out there and waiting them out on the inside. And if you wait long enough, people on the inside run out of food. And you recall, the situation got so bad, what did the women start doing? Eating their own children. Remember that one woman got mad at the other? We ate my son today. And she said, well, you can eat my son tomorrow. You say you never would do something like that. God forbid that we would. But what? We've never been that hungry. We've never been that hungry. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying we've never been. Years ago, there was an airplane crash in the Andes, a soccer team, and everybody didn't die. But they were on a mountain. It was snow covered. Nobody could find them. And they wound up doing what? Eating the bodies of their teammates. And of course, the world looked at them, and said, how could you do such an awful thing? Who knows what we would do? I don't know. But we've never been that hungry. We've never been that hungry. It's going to be bad, is the idea behind this rider on the black horse. With the scales, a measure of wheat, measure here we're told is about a quart. A quart of wheat for a penny, well, that sounds fairly good to us, right? I mean, we've got a lot of those Abraham Lincolns lying around. But the penny here is not with Abraham Lincoln's picture on it. This is the denarius. This is what, if you worked all day, at the end of the day, you received a penny or a denarius. What this is saying is things are going to get so bad and food's going to get so short that a quart of wheat, you'll have to work an entire day just to get a quart of wheat. It'd be like today. I don't know what minimum wage is, but say $10 an hour or $7.25 an hour, whatever, we'll say 10. Work all day, 8 hours, $80. At the end of the day, you could buy half a loaf of bread for $80. We're complaining about high food prices now, aren't we? It's not that bad yet, is it? It's not that bad yet. Who knows? But again, this is talking about first century times. It's going to get bad. Food's going to get scarce. Now you can, if you want to, buy 3 measures of barley for a whole day's wage. This tells us which was more desired, wheat or barley. You wanted to eat the wheat, But if worse comes to worse, you could get 3 times as much barley. That was the poor man's meal. I'd much rather eat catfish, but if it comes down to it, I'll eat carp. But I'd much rather have catfish. Much rather have wheat than barley, but when you're starving, you eat whatever. Again, this is scarcity. We read in the Bible of several folks who endured famines so bad that Abraham had to move. Remember, where did he move to for a time? Down south to where he lied about his wife. She's my sister. Who did he lie to? Pharaoh, right? Egypt. He had to move to Egypt. Famine was bad. Isaac, Jacob, all endured famine. Paul knew what hunger was. And again, when you've got war, you've got bloodshed, you've got famine. Bad times. But notice the end of verse 6, do not hurt the oil and the wine. I'm told that olive trees survive drought very well. Their roots go very deep. Any plant that has shallow roots is not going to survive a drought or famine. But olive trees, the roots grow deep. We're told that the Roman emperor actually gave the order, don't destroy all the vineyards. You can trim them up, but leave the vineyards. And so when Rome came calling with their destructive forces, there were trees spared, and there were vineyards spared, and thus the phrase, don't hurt the oil and the wine. There would be enough for people to survive, but it's going to be tough. Verse 7, when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature or beast say, I've got something else, John, for you to see. By now, John's thinking it's got to be another horse. I've seen 3, and John's right. If he's thinking that, here comes a fourth. That's verse 8. And I looked and saw a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death. And hell, or Hades, followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with a sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beast of the earth. We're not left in doubt as to what this horse and rider represent. This is a pale horse. Pale is often associated with what? When I die, is my face going to be rosy red? No. Why is my face rosy red now? I've got a heart that's pumping blood. When my heart stops pumping blood, you lose all color. Pale. The rider that sat on him, the pale horse, fittingly has the rider of death. And of course, in death, there is the realm of the spirits, and that is the Hadean realm, where spirits go when they die. So death cuts down, and Hades receives the spirits that are cut down, almost as if you're baling hay. You've got the baler baling the hay, and then sometimes they'll pull a wagon behind the baler to shoot the hay into the wagon. That's sort of what death is doing. It's mowing folks down and sending souls to Hades. Hell followed with him. Notice in this widespread assault that it will be limited to the fourth part of the earth. In other words, it's going to ravage a lot of folks. A lot of people will be killed, some with a sword. A lot of times in war, more people actually die from what? Not the sword. Hunger and disease usually will kill more than the actual war. Depending on where you live, obviously. To kill with sword, hunger, death, and even with the animals or the beasts of the earth. You can read about Christians being thrown into the Roman Colosseum. And the Roman citizens sat in the stands. You can go today to Rome and you can see the Colosseum, what's left of that. And you can imagine them sitting, you don't want to imagine them sitting in the stands. And to entertain the Roman people, they would drag Christians in the arena, and along with the Christians inside would be lions. They would set the lions. And they just got a thrill out of watching Christians mauled and killed and dismembered and eaten. is going to happen, John says, to them. We're talking about first century times. Not that war has stopped, but we're saying the initial application here. Well, the horses now, they're over. Well, I say they're over. That is, the vision of the horses are over. And I believe these were fulfilled in the early church. But we see the principles, obviously, in every generation, including ours, but fulfilled primarily in the early church. Christians then. Get ready, John is saying, trouble's coming. Verse 9, when he opened the fifth seal, now there's no longer horses. I saw under the altar. What did they use altars for in the Old Testament? Sacrifice. And they, in fact, in the New Testament, until the time of until Jesus' death, obviously, they used altars for sacrifice. And the picture is symbolically of Christians being sacrificed on an altar. And I saw the spirits of those who had been killed simply because they were Christians. Again, the preceding verse is talking about the onslaught of Roman persecution coming. Verse 9, those who were killed in that onslaught. I saw these souls of those who were killed for the word of God. They maintained their faith. And the testimony they held, they didn't give up on the Lord. In verse 10, they cried. They cried with a loud voice saying, how long, God, is this going to go on? It doesn't seem fair to us that Christians ought to be treated this way. These are your people. When will you step in and deal with the enemy? That's what these are saying. John hears them say, verse 10, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Verse 11, white robes were given to every one of them. To who? Those in verse 10. The souls, right? These are visions. White, a symbol of victory. You didn't give up on the Lord. You lost your life for it. You're going to be clothed in white robes. In response to the question of verse 10, it was said to them, well, rest for a little season. That is, if the events of this persecution run its course. This is going to end, in other words. But before it ends, there are going to be a lot more people, what? A lot more Christians put to death. Until their fellow servants also and their brothers that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. Revelation is saying there has been persecution, church. There will be even more persecution. It looks as if Rome, the Roman Empire, is going to have its way with God's people, but eventually the persecutor is going to be brought to defeat. Rome will come to an end. Verse 12. I looked when he had opened the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. Did the moon turn into blood? Like blood. Which is what color? Red, okay. 13, the stars of heaven fell to the earth. We know that this is symbolic language. Number one, because we read similar language in the Old Testament when a nation was brought down. When God saw to it that a nation was brought down, be it Israel, Babylon, Assyria, this type of language was used. Stars falling to the earth. This great power is going to be brought down is the meaning of that. We know that literally stars can't fall to the earth, correct? Our sun is a star, correct? Would the sun fit on the earth? Could the sun fall down and sit on the earth? How many earths can fit inside our sun? I mean, I don't know. You can go online and people figure that out. This is symbolic language depicting a power falling. Rome falling is my understanding. The stars of heaven fell to the earth even as a fig tree sheds her figs when she's shaken of a mighty wind. You could use the image of an apple tree, peach tree, whatever kind of tree you've got. When that fruit gets ripe and there's a strong wind, down they come. A lot of times before you want them to come down. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Some people see in this the end of the earth, a depiction of the end of the earth. But when the earth ends, mountains and islands aren't going to be moved out of their places, right? What will happen to mountains and islands and everything else? They're going to be burned up. This is not talking about the end of the earth. This is, my mind, talking about the downfall of the Roman Empire. Well, why not spell it out? That's a logical question. Why not just spell it out? I'm talking about the downfall of the Roman Empire. What would Rome do if they got a copy of this? Predicting the downfall of the Roman Empire, and these Christians have this, they're plotting our demise. That's one reason, in my understanding, this is written in the symbolic language. They knew what it meant. Persecution will come to an end. Kings of the earth and the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, the mighty men and bondmen and free men hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains. This is not the end of the earth, because there will be no rocks or mountains to hide in. It's going to be destroyed. And said to the mountains and rocks, if you're familiar with the Alamo in Texas, you recall that the main forces in that battle were us against who? Who did we fight in the Alamo? Russians? Chinese? Mexico, right? Mexico. And what was his name? I'm going to butcher history. Adam's not here, so I forget his name. Anyway, he was this big, tough fella, but when push came to shove and he saw he was being defeated, what did he do? Let me find the mountains and hills to hide in. Off he went and off he ran. When you've got these awfully tough Roman rulers, seeing that their demise is coming, they're going to lose courage. And they're going to hide, as many would do. Fall on us. Hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Now, yes, we'll see the wrath of God when the earth ends, yes. But I don't believe that's what this is talking about. I believe this is talking about the downfall of the Roman Empire and God's wrath, bringing about the downfall of that, which would give tremendous encouragement to these Christians. Our enemy's going to meet his end. In the meantime, what do we need to do? Remain faithful. The application for us is obvious. We have enemies all around. The greatest enemy is the devil. We fight. Sometimes we lose. The war's not over. Hang in there, God says, because one day our enemy is going to be brought to an end, and then heaven will begin. We're out of time. We'll pick up next Sunday, Lord willing, and we'll see about that. But our next study, at least, will be Revelation chapter 7.